Good morning. I want to thank everybody who joins us at Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. My name is Olga Atamanova. It's been 10 years of the war, and today is day 461 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by Russian aggressor. And today we will be talking about the protection of our children in the eve of the International Day of Children's Protection. We will talk about the conditions that our children unfortunately end up in and the challenges they're facing during the full-scale invasion. I want to introduce a speaker. Today is Darya Gerasimchuk, Commissioner of the President of Ukraine for Children's Rights. Please, Ms. Darya, the floor is yours. Good morning, everybody. I would like to start today with the facts, something that was of my personal impression today. My daughter spent the night in the hall, and it was not the first night she spent in the hall. Within the last month, she goes to sleep right in the hall because she doesn't want to be woken up and switch locations. It's easier for her that way. For the first time in 14 years, well, the 14 years of her life actually is the first time that I'm happy that she's deaf and she doesn't hear the explosions in the night. This is the first time I'm sincerely happy about that, because my child is not alone like this. Thousands of Ukrainian children are forced to live under conditions like that. Isn't it a violation of children's rights that is stipulated by the United Nations Charter? This right is violated now during the war. I have a special place, special shelf in my soul with the story of a 7-year-old girl from Odessa region, Sasha Paskay. I personally know this cool Ukrainian. I'm not a friend of this war. She lost her leg, and her leg was amputated after a shelling of her village by Russians. This girl is very positive. There's a lot of materials about her, I'm sure. If you don't know about Sasha, if you haven't seen her personally, my advice is to get familiarized with her story. She liked, before the amputation, she liked the gymnastics. She was dreaming about the sports career, and after the amputation, after prosthetics, she got back to her training. It's incredible when you see the eyes of a child, and she says, look what I can do. I can do a split. I can lift my leg like this. So she's just as strong as thousands of other Ukrainian children who are forced to build their lives anew. Isn't it a violation of the right of protection against all the forms of physical and psychological violence stipulated by United Nations Convention? Physical violence, psychological violence, because children have to get back to what they were dreaming about from scratch. In Ukraine, before the full-scale invasion of our country by Russian Federation, there were about 7.5 million children, and unfortunately all of them are subject to a very serious psychological trauma when they hear explosions, when they hear the signal of air raid alert. The recent attack on Kiev, during that attack, everybody was agitated by the video where children were running along the street, yelling of fear, yelling out of anger. So those 7.5 million children, they wait for somebody to come back from the front line, someone from their families, their parents, their close ones, Some of them have to say goodbye to some of their parents who were killed in the front lines or killed during the Russian shelling. Isn't it a violation of children's rights? Children cannot easily go to school as they used to do because a lot of schools are now destroyed in Ukraine. They cannot attend dance classes, they cannot attend other activities because those establishments just don't exist anymore. Their playgrounds don't exist anymore, sport grounds don't exist anymore. Many homes are destroyed. The childhood. This is what our enemies are trying to take away from our children. Isn't it a violation of their rights, their right to education, family, recreation, and rest? It's difficult to say about something like this, that the youngest victim of sexual violence committed by Russians in Ukraine is only 4 years old. I don't think that there will be a person in this world who would say that this is not a violation of the right of children for protection against all forms of sexual exploitation. I would like to ask you to turn on the video and then we will talk about that. My name is Vladislav Buryak. I was captured at 16 years and I was staying captive for more than 90 days. The beginning of the full-scale invasion caught Vlad and his parents in different places. The boy was looking after his sick grandfather back then, so there was an evacuation convoy of maybe around 100 vehicles. We were leaving Melitopol on our way to Zaporizhia. In one of the blockposts, the vehicle where Vlad was sitting in was stopped, and according to his words, the Russians who were looking like Chechens looked at him. They took him out of the vehicle and asked him, should I shoot you right in the head or should I break your phone? I was really frightened, I was scared, and I was realizing I can be shot right now for no reason. So Russians and the convoy accompanied Vlad to the filtration camp. So I only realized that I'm captured only when I was put on a military vehicle and I was put in a confinement cell where I was sitting all alone. It was very small, 3 to 2 meters. There was a powerful echo inside, and if you sit in the very depth of it, like 5 to 4 meters from my chamber, someone was being tortured. I could hear it as if that person was tortured right near by my side. So every day you're waking up and you're scared because it's a lottery. You can either survive today or not. According to Vlad's words, he was trying to do something in order not to go crazy. So there was another man coming to my chamber. He was 24. The Russians were torturing him for 3 days. He was electrified. He was beaten severely with the stocks, with the arm stocks, with the feet, and then they took off his pants and he was electrified, his genitals. After 3 days he just went crazy. He wanted to hang himself right in the cell, and then he wanted to cut his veins. We were talking to him. I remember his eyes as if nothing happened, and in the beginning we were talking and then he says, I feel so hot, can you give me some water please? So first he cut his hand and I had to clean the room where he cut his. So it was not the first time when Russians were forcing Vlad to clean the blood, and the most scary picture is when I entered that cell and there was a man hanging from the ceiling tied to the ceiling with his hands. And under that person, the floor was all covered in blood, and there was also one small bucket by his side, like half a liter, maybe liter, and it was full of blood. And there was a desk in that room where the Russian military was sitting at and writing down his testimonies. I cannot describe it. You know, there was once or twice when I was feeling the tears coming out of my eyes, but I was very scared that if anybody sees me crying, they understand that I'm broken and they would be about to get rid of me. So Vlad spent 90 days as captive until Russians decided to let him go. So he used the help of Ukrainians to meet his father. So when I was going on that vehicle, I was incredibly happy that everything was over. But you know, it's like the heart, as if it understands that everything is alright, everything is over, but the pain does not go away. I rethought my life completely, the value of it, and I realized that no matter how difficult is the situation, there is the way out. We need to end this war as soon as possible. According to the details from the National Information Bureau, 19,531 Ukrainian children were illegally and forcibly deported to Russia, Belarus, and occupied parts of Ukraine. I took this interview by myself. This boy, who is essentially still a child, when he was telling me some terrible things, well, I didn't add all of them to the interview. It was difficult for me to realize what the child went through when he was sitting in that shell. Maybe you did not understand it to the completely, but there was a young man cutting his veins right in front of him, and he could everything he could do, he could only talk to him while that one was dying. So how can a child survive a torture like this? Just rushing a little bit ahead, that man survived, the one that cut his veins. The Russians took him out of the cell and they sent him to the hospital, and he made it alive. But as Vlad was telling this, how he was cleaning the cell of the blood, how he was cleaning that blood after all of our Ukrainians who were tortured. So again, isn't it a violation of the right of a child to protection against torture and other inhumane or humiliating behaviors? This is the right that is contemplated by the United Nations Convention. So isn't it a violation of such right? It absolutely is. And one of the latest examples that I want to give you, I think everybody remembers the 2 days old boy Sergei. He is the youngest victim, the youngest child killed by Russians. The youngest one that we know about. Sergei was only able to make it for 2 days, and he died right in the maternity home when his mother just fed him. In the midnight, she put him in the crib, and at that very moment, Russian missile was incoming right on the maternity home. Mother and Sergei, they ended up under the rubble. In the morning, our state emergency service were able to pull them out in the morning, and unfortunately Sergei died, and only his mother made it alive. So he was not even able to get to know his father. This is the violation of the right to life. So now we can say that evil has a name. The aggressor has a name. It's Russian Federation. During any war, the children suffer, but What is going on in Ukraine cannot be described in such words as suffering. Now, absolutely all of the rights of children are violated during this war. Now we are forced to calculate the statistics of the victims of the child victims during this war. Those are the terrible wars by themselves. I never thought that I will need to say something like that about Ukraine, but look at the screen. Right now you can see the screenshot of the joint information platform Children of War. It's the portal that was created upon the special order of the President of Ukraine within the framework of the word of the coordination team with the office of the President of Ukraine, headed by the head of the President of the office of the President of Ukraine, Darya Gerasimchuk. I'm asking our technical team to put the screenshot on the screen. So that portal is something that enables us to gather the information on a daily basis about the child victims, because just in one click you can submit a report and submit any other information that became known to you. So this website is updated every morning. I hate the mornings because every morning I open the portal and I'm checking whether the figures have changed, because I understand that every figure is the destroyed family. It's a distorted life of a child, and it's really very, very horrible. For the time being, the portal is a witness, the testimony of the genocide policy of Russian Federation against our Ukrainian children, because they kill our children, they wound our children, they commit sexual violence in relation of our children, they abduct the children, they forcibly deport and displace our children. On top of the conditions that they create in temporarily occupied territories that are unfit for living of children, they change the citizenship of our children, they hand them over to be fostered and adopted by the citizens of Russian Federation. All the facts I've just listed is nothing other than genocide of the Ukrainian people through Ukrainian children. So for the time being, the statistics that I've mentioned is as follows. 483 children have died, or I would rather say were killed. And this is only the statistics that we know about those territories that are under the control of Ukrainian government. 989 people were severely wounded. Those are the documented injuries. 394 children are missing in action, and 19,484 children are those that we know for sure were forcibly deported and displaced. And in this terrible counter there are two more windows that are optimistic, just like in any other situation. So those two fields are the number of children who were on search as missing in action and were then found. So we were able to find 12,979 children, and another field is those whom we were able to return from the forced displacement. 371 today. Yesterday that number was 370, and today my soul is happy. This is just one. It's something minor for the statistics, but it's the saved life of a child. I would like to stop on the issue of the forced deportation and displacement of Ukrainian children. Obviously, Ukraine is not a unique case. During the war, all the crimes that I just told about, this is something that's happening, but the world has never seen this crime happening in such a mass nature. So there are two goals that Russians pursue. They want to destroy Ukrainian children because they understand that they are fundamental to our nation, or to break them down and Russify them, to turn them into Russians, to replenish their nation with Ukrainian kids. And it's terrible to say things like this. So to kill the children, there are one category of crimes, and to replenish their the Russians use the deportation of Ukrainian children. So Russians communicate 744,000 Ukrainian kids, as they tell them, as they describe them as evacuated. This is presented as a good deed, but we know it's no evacuation, but specifically what Ukraine was talking about from the very beginning. It's abduction, deportation, the forced displacement of the children. Obviously, it's very good that now us as the global community, we got the confirmation of our statement. The arrest warrant for Putin and Maria Lvova-Belova issued by the International Criminal Court for deportation and forced displacement of children. It means that the facts that we were stating from the very beginning are absolutely true. Russians are not going to bring Ukrainian children back. Obviously, they don't provide any information about the list of those 744,000 children whom they, so to say, evacuated, neither to Ukraine nor to any third party, either international organization or Ukrainian organization. So we don't trust that figure. We deem it exaggerated. According to our calculation, Russians could abduct 200,000 to 300,000 Ukrainian children who were in occupied territories, where Russians fortified themselves for a certain period. I mean, the Russian army. So now we have this number, 19,000, a little bit more than 19,400 who were forcibly deported. That's not final number, but that is the confirmed number. Just like the killed children is not a final number, the injured children are not a final number, because part of the Ukrainian territory is still occupied, and after the occupation of and yet another village or town, we see new buchas with mass graves, new Iziums with torture rooms, new Khersons with torture chambers, the new places where Russia were keeping Ukrainian children hostages, just like in that story with Vlad that we've just seen. Now Russians implement their genocide policy against Ukrainian children in a number of options. They commit a number of crimes, and even the crime of deportation they committed under 5 different scenarios, at least 5 different scenarios. But having analyzed the information, we can now segregate the 6th scenario for abduction of Ukrainian children. In brief, obviously Russians first kill the parents and then they abduct the children. They separate children from their parents during the screening measures. They deprive the families of the parent rights under fabricated reasons. Russians do not admit Ukrainian side, so we could take our children away from the institutional care facilities. They create the humanitarian crisis. They leave children with nothing, and then they deport them. And the mass scenario is when Russians creating the conditions unfit for living, offer the parents to sign the consent for recreation in Russian camps. Obviously nobody brings children back after that. Why am I saying it's forced? Because in the majority of cases the parents are being left without options because they are being intimidated. They're being told that you are going to be deprived of your parents' rights, we're taking your child away, and they never come back. And the sixth scenario that I've just mentioned, we see that Russians, they make forced medical examination of the children when they suddenly diagnose children with something that requires rehabilitation in Russian Federation, and they exercise pressure on the parents, and they say, if you don't give us your child, we're taking it away one way or another. So this is how the Russians select the children that they are taken away from Ukraine. So today I would like to say that Ukrainians are an incredible nation. We do everything to fight for our freedom. Ukraine is no victim. There is an aggressor who tries to take away our future, but we are no victim. We are a fighter. Our child is a fighter, unfortunately. Every of our adult is a fighter. And that's why I want to ask everybody, all the adults who are hearing me now, just adhere to a number of rules that me as a mother, as the commissioner of the president for children's rights and child's rehabilitation, that I want to advise to you. Please, at all times, remember that a conscious adult by child's side is something that a child can rely upon. Us as an adults, we are supposed to ensure all the rights of the children. I'm convinced that when we win, when we rebuild Ukraine, we're not gonna have to protect the children's rights. We will have only to organize the conditions under which children may exercise their rights so they don't need protection. So dear parents and other adults, please remember that psychical and psychological condition of a children depends on you. I strongly recommend you to get familiarized with the program TOYAK, the mental health program under the patronage of Olena Zelenska, the First Lady. It contains the special consultations, advice. There are hotlines for children and adults. You can get all the knowledge necessary so that just in case you could help yourself, help your child, and help other people around you. Be honest, be open with your children. Remember, the children, they have a right to cry, to weep, to laugh, to feel hatred and love, to be happy and to be sad. Children are entitled to all of those, and the adults are responsible for making sure those rights are complied with. Thank you, Ms. Darya. Regarding our deported children, we understand that now procedure is extremely difficult. We know that it's difficult to return all of our children. We understand that even according to our data, it's more than 19,000 of them. To what extent is the process complicated? Do we have any prospects of bringing them back within the shortest term possible? There is no procedure for bringing back children for the time being, and those 371 child that we were able to bring back, and us, when I say we, I mean the whole government team, which involves a lot of agencies and offices who in cooperation with the civil organizations, they work together to bring children back, and their return of those children or small groups of children are the whole operations, because the Russians do everything so we couldn't find the children. But for the time being, I can say that we engage all the mechanisms possible. We try to engage all of our international partners to create the new system, to find the steps, the ways that will allow us to find and bring back every Ukrainian child the soonest possible, but also to create a new global system for children's security in all around the world, because what we do now for Ukrainian children is what we're doing for all of the children of the world, because today they are Ukrainian kids and in future they may be the kids of from some other countries, and we're trying to find ways to make sure that the maniacs whose name is Russian Federation, they cannot do it this way, that they abduct a child and they say that I've adopted the child because I want them to live with me, because the children are better off with me. So if that maniac does not realize that they will be punished, the children are never gonna be brought back. So now we're trying to find those tools, those mechanisms which would allow us to the maximum extent influence Russian Federation politically, so that they understand that the responsibility is inevitable and the children should be brought back. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Please proceed to your questions. Olena Sobko, Ukrinform. Miss Darya, do you have any figures about the Ukrainian children who are currently abroad, who are evacuated, and what is the tendency? Are they coming back? And another question, do you document the facts of children being brought back who were educated in institutional education facilities? Are those mass cases or individual? My first response to your first question will be, I don't have those numbers now. I'm not ready to answer this question right now, but I'm sure we're talking about millions of evacuated Ukrainian children, and in fact it's very good, because we have to understand that first of all we have to think and care about the security and safety of our children. The Ukrainian cities are not safe for them, and if parents can leave, for evacuation and work remotely, it's very good, specifically if we talk about the areas of active warfare and adjacent areas where children should not be, and the parents should leave from those areas at their first opportunity. So talking about bringing back of the children who were in institutional care facilities, now we document such cases, and very important item is that there is the coordination headquarters for protection of children, which is headed by Miss Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk, and I'm a part of this coordination headquarters. I'm the deputy head. And I want to stress that the coordination headquarters developed the recommendations. Not for the first time, we developed recommendations for the CIMIC administrations for bringing back Ukrainian children. What is necessary to make sure the children are brought back? So this checklist is quite expansive. Obviously, it's up to the military administration about the decisions about the evacuation and bringing back of Ukrainian children, but those recommendations as to the conditions to be checked, they are available to them. And sometimes I'm personally enraged about the decisions of military administrations about bringing children back to the conditions that are not in compliance with the checklist. I personally submit my reports to CIMIC administrations to ensure proper conditions for the children. I cannot say that it's a mass phenomenon for the time being, but sometimes it does happen, because yes, in some cities the conditions are fit for children to be coming back. And what's important here is that the family forms of education for every child. I don't want anybody to forget that during the war we continued to develop this family forms of education to make sure children don't live in institutional care facilities. They are always better off in the family. So when children come back to Ukraine, we do everything possible to make sure that we find a family for all the children, so that children don't end up in the institutions. Thank you for this answer. And my last question will be about the story of this guy, of this boy who ended up in captivity. Do we tell this story to some of our international partners? Yes, exactly. I want to appeal to you. There is a reason I'm talking to you about the Children of War portal, because there are stories of the children there with Ukrainian and English subtitles. The stories of the children are being updated. We keep making them so you could use it in full or in part with reference to Children of War portal. Please tell these stories. Information front is very important. All the world should be aware of those stories. It's important because, as I said, it's one of the most difficult conversations in my life, but I wanted to say to Vlad, just stop. I don't want to know it. I cannot really know it. I couldn't tell it to him because he survived it and we all should know about it. No one should forget about it. So please broadcast it. Keep telling people. Vlad is currently rehabilitated. He's outside Ukraine, and Vlad is not the only child who was kept captive by the Russians. In the portal Children of War, you may see a story of 14-year-old Vitaly from Kherson who spent 14 days in a torture chamber, and the stories of other children as well. Thank you very much for this broadcast, for this information. Dear friends, I'm reminding you, joining us was Darya Gerasimchuk, the Commissioner of the President of Ukraine for Children's Rights. Thank you for this conversation, and we want to thank our armed forces for the opportunity to hold events like that. Let's work together for our victory, and glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.